All right, so everything you're saying sort of brings us to the meat of what my whole show has been about for the last 6, 7 months, which is what's going on with the left. So you're talking about these leftists that are sort of enabling the Islamists to go about their business. So I get it. So there's the Islamists who are the believers, I suppose, and they're protecting their religion, they're protecting their ideology, and they want to propagate the ideology in whatever country they're in. As you're showing right now, it's happening in the UK. But then there's just people on the left, progressives usually, who then, as I keep saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. I think they think in most cases that they're defending Muslim people, but you are a living, breathing example of how misguided that is, correct?
Absolutely. For example, the problem that you see here surrounding you right now, we have been encountering this from 2006-7. The very moment we started talking about Islam, suddenly the leftists jumped in and they started saying all these things I mentioned earlier. And they used to kind of come up with the moral relativism and say that, who are you to criticize what Muslims do or Islam has? I mean, they used to come up with even weird ideas. For example, if you say humanism is your value system, then who are you to say humanism is better than Islamism? For all we know, Islamism could be better than humanism. And they come up with all these different fallacy, I would say. They say things have been like this, so why don't we not change it and keep it that way?
Do you think most of the people on the left, I'm not talking about the Islamists, but the nominal, the white Christian in the United States that's doing this from the progressive side, do you think their intentions are pure, or are they being totally duped? I can't tell what. I mean, obviously it's to varying degrees depending on the person. I think some are just willfully being duped, some are unwillfully being duped, some are trying to do something good, some actually have bad intentions and are lining up with the Islamists. Is it just a big mix of all of that?
I have some very wild theories about the whole of the world and why the real story about Islam do not get propagated to the world. I think media has a huge role in this. And we know Saudi Arabia spends billions and hundreds of billions of dollars in patronizing certain media firms and public relation firms who then kind of uses its machinery to progress a certain kind of message for the audience. And this is where kind of a racial comment I might make, saying that you might find it kind of offensive, saying that the white people, the white audience, or the general average Americans are not actually being fed the right information thanks to the media, and that media is owned and paid by the Islamists, and that Islamists have already employed those media. And I think the left, the problem about the left, I'm not saying all the left is bad, but the left that is more vocal is actually pretending to be the left, and then they're, I can't curse maybe.
You can curse. Believe me, every time this comes up, I want to curse. Sometimes I do. Go ahead.
So what they want to say about the Islamism is actually a version or kind of a inhibitor for the rest of the world, or the progressives. Well, the word progressive is kind of hijacked now.
Right.
For people like us, when we try to bring the issues forward and they use those inhibitors to dampen our voice, and we never get any media coverage, because what we say could be so inflammatory that the status quo surrounding the use of Islam. And there is also another issue that is quite predominantly problematic here in the UK, is about brushing the whole of the migrant community with one brush, calling them Muslim. For example, I belong to Bangladeshi diaspora. We have a huge population here. I think the largest immigrant community is Bangladeshi, and then we have some Indian and some Pakistani. All of are coming from different background, different ethnicity, different cultural, heritage and everything. But in the UK, government, along with the left, are interested in classing us as Muslims. I'm not freaking Muslim.
Yeah.
Indians, majority of the Indians are Hindu. Still, they are classed as Muslims. And whenever we try to correct this, it's not happening. Nobody's interested. The right, the left, everybody seems to be kind of want to generalize us as Muslims. And that's where the politics comes in, and they want to keep it that way for some strange, very strange reason.
Right. So there's so much there. So you're talking about first that there's funding from Saudi Arabia, from Qatar. You know, I think Al Jazeera is the best example of this because Al Jazeera is owned by the government of Qatar. We know Qatar is funding all sorts of terrorist organizations, especially in the Middle East, but all over the world, basically. And it's funny because Al Jazeera...
That we know of.
Go ahead.
We know of. The extremist funding is something that is investigated and brought onto the public knowledge. But what we don't know, nobody has done any kind of proper research investigation. And I'm kind of inviting every journalist there is through you to see if they can do an investigation on Qatari money or Islamist money going to public relation firms, media firms, journalistic, big journalists or news outlets, how they get the fund and how that fund is used to skew the worldview for the rest of the population. Nobody has done that research as far as I know.
Right. Well, I mean, there's no doubt that some of that exists because if you, even with the case of Al Jazeera, you know, they opened up Al Jazeera America here. It just announced that it's closing about a month ago and it lost something like $500 million or something and whatever. But it was interesting to me that so many of my friends on the left made it out to seem like this is where we're going to finally get truth in media. Our media is pretty bad here, I fully admit that, right? And our online media used to be better, that's getting bad too. But all these people on the left were suddenly saying, oh yes, we're going to get good international and American news from a news organization funded by the government of Qatar. And they thought that was a legitimate thought. So that goes to show how the money and Saudi Arabia opening madrasas, and mosques, I think in the UK too, but certainly in Bangladesh, right?
Well, in the UK, if you want to erect a mosque, you have a project proposal. All you need to show that you have the willingness. You go to some donors. Suddenly, you have £1 million in your pocket to use, and that has been the case for the rest of the world. Like you heard, Germany. Saudi Arabia will not take one immigrant,
right,
but when they arrive, they say, we're going to build 40 mosques for you. Do you want it? Obviously, Germany didn't agree. Lucky for them, but UK is not so lucky. And I think going back to your comment about Al Jazeera, the biggest evidence of Islamic money in the American media, in my view, is when the clock boy, what's his name? Ahmed, happened.
Yeah.
I mean, you could see the hoo-ha that was created for no good reason, and that was to elevate the profile and the discussion and the discourse. There is another example I saw personally, and I didn't like, and we actually, from our Atheist Bangladesh page, we protested. Is in the program run by this South African comedian who recently replaced Jon Stewart.
Oh, The Daily Show. The Daily Show.
Yeah. Suddenly this hijabi person comes in and uses demagoguery to say apparently hijab is privatizing a women's sexuality, which is completely a fallacy.
I see this meme well, I didn't see that specifically, but this idea that somehow that's giving woman an ownership of her body, even though she probably didn't get to choose it, or in most cases. Right. This idea, though, is propagating all over the left right now.
That's what they buy. And in UK, Guardian ran exactly the same thing, saying that wearing a hijab could be the biggest feminist statement you can make, which is completely bonkers, and everybody was infuriated. However, nobody's kind of challenging them. I don't know how those placement of content gets in American media, but certainly people need to be aware of this kind of fooling around.
Yeah, so I'm curious, I assume you know Tommy Robinson, right? Or know of Tommy Robinson?
unfortunately,
No,
the name doesn't ring a
no.
bell.
So Tommy Robinson, I've had him on the show. He was at one time one of the founders of the English Defense League. He works with Pegida now.
Uh,
So even if you don't know him specifically,
I know the EDL, yeah.
yeah. So I'm curious, what do you think of these organizations in general? Because I've argued for a long time now that these organizations that are most people consider them far right or really anti-immigrant, or that they have some level of true bigotry or racism in them, that I would argue that it's the left, by not dealing with these issues honestly, that has led to the rise of these things. So I would assume that at some level you probably have some agreement with them, and then at the same time, that can't feel very good, right?
EDL, when I hear what they say whatever they say. If you put it in a pie chart, 30% of what they say, I would agree. In fact, they say exactly the same thing what I say about
Yeah.
Islamism. However, then their discussion goes towards we are white nation in England. We are a white nation. We are a Christian white nation, and they raise the flag, the English flag, which is not the United Kingdom's flag, which has got a cross in between. And then they suddenly start talking about how good white they are and everything. Their value system, maybe they want to protect their country from immigrants. I can understand that. Maybe they want to protect their kind of livelihood because the immigrants are kind of bringing in cheap labor, and that's why they're feeling threatened. But my suspicion is that EDL actually possibly work with the Islamists themselves. In the
Really?
front, they fight between themselves, but I think because you can see the result, the ultimate result is they fuel each other. And that's where I think the beneficiary comes in, that the Islamists get an attack from the far right, and then suddenly they show, and the left then suddenly comes in to protect the minority, and then obviously there is support for the EDL. And for example, there's another party recently in the UK called UKIP, United Kingdom Independent Party. They want to be independent, fueling the same sort of general people mass mentality. I think that's where the same mentality that fuels Trump and Ted Cruz. However, the left is not doing anything good by using the Muslims, and that's where the brushing and using a general brush comes into play, in my view.
Right. So what do we do about that? As people, everything that you have said that I know about you, I believe the same things about secular living and atheism and free thought and humanism. And I think most of my audience believes in those same things. So what do we do here? If you're the average person in the UK and you want to help this situation, which I think is worse right now in the UK than it is in the United States. I still think we're a little bit behind you on a lot of this stuff. What do you do to help these voices?
Well, in the UK, I think in some aspects we are doing much better than America. For example, in
Really?
UK there is no legal issue that helps. For example, Christianity, or for example, education system, or for example, I heard even yesterday that there are, I think, bills are being passed where creationism is being progressed in certain states, and also the transgender issue about somebody can be fined for if they're in England. It's actually the other direction, that there is no such law because because it's a small country, there is not many people, and it's got a good tradition of having a very strong opinion about these things, and the trajectory is towards humanism. And also because it's part of the overall European Union, Europeans are quite good in human rights and all these things, and they're going towards that. I think in America, in some aspects, you have free speech and voice, but in some aspects where you don't have the guard down, or you have the guard down, some things are encroaching in. And my observation about America is that the legislature, the governments are heavily owned by I think the people who belong to the business mentality.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it.
And they have vested interest in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Christianity all together. That's why I'm trying to. That's my opinion. Is
Yeah.
you can't divide between Christianity and Islam, because in front they may have some sort of friction, but at the back, where the actual real neat problems are, there is no problem. They kind of help each other.
Yeah.
So if we can get to the legislature and kind of stop those things and come towards the right kind of the light, it might help.
Yeah, there's so much there because it's like here in America, I have all my friends on the left who are screaming and screaming about Trump. And I've done many videos on why I don't like Trump, and I've had some of his supporters on, and they explain why they like him. But I was at a party a couple weeks ago, all Hollywood, lefty, LA liberals, and they were all freaking out about Trump. And I said, guys, the one you really have to fear is Ted Cruz, because he's coming from the religious side of this. You know what I mean? Like, if you're truly a secularist and all that, Trump, yeah, says a lot of, he's a blowhard and all the reasons that there are not to like him. But but Cruz, I think, actually believes the religious stuff he's saying. That type of demagogue is always much scarier to me.
Well, he's definitely dishonest, and he's a freaking liar. Trump may be a lunatic, but I don't think he lies. But if Darwin forbids, if he goes to
Yeah.
if he goes to the office, this would be a disaster, because everything he says about Saudi Arabia, nothing will change, because the Texan money that has this huge, humongous relationship with Saudi Arabia will continue, because he actually represents that sort of people. Although right now he's using anti-Muslim or anti-Islamic fervor of the people, he will not change it. Definitely not.
So that's really interesting. So you think if Trump came in, despite all this stuff that he's saying about how he would change business relationships, what he has said about Islam, I mean, look, Obama was in Saudi Arabia just in these last couple of days. We know this relationship's not going anywhere. So that's sort of depressing that between Obama and Trump, you're saying Saudi Arabia's still got a stranglehold on us either way.
I don't know how much you know about the history. If you have 2 hours to spend, and your audience, go and watch a video called Bitter Lake. I don't know if you heard of it. It's a documentary made by Adam Curtis. He's a British documentary maker. And it is so close to the truth that BBC was afraid to air it in the broadcasting media. It's online. You can go and watch it, but it's also on our Atheist Bangladesh page or in YouTube, anywhere you can find. This shows you that in 1980s, I think, or surrounding that area, when the Arab War happened, Saudi Arabia suddenly raised the oil price huge, and then whole world crumbled down, and America had to get on his knees and then beg to Saudi Arabia for. And that situation has not changed. We have not gone out of the dependency of the petroleum, and Saudi Arabia still has huge control. And that's why even if America says that Saudi Arabia is going freeloader and everything, that's just media talk. But in reality, Saudi Arabia is nowhere to go unless we can find cleaner energy or find an alternative to it.
Man, it's depressing when you think about, so we're talking about the oil stuff, which we know we have to get off just to save our country, if forgetting being in bed with bad guys, just to save our country, the world, right? And then you also add in that Saudi Arabia is exporting all this Sunni Wahhabism, all the real radicalism, and we know that 18 of the 21 9/11 hijackers came from there. Just this week, the Obama administration said that people that have relatives that they lost in 9/11 wouldn't be able to sue Saudi Arabia. So, man, there's a lot there. I got to get an expert in on that.
1945, President Roosevelt met the king of Saudi Arabia in a warplane or warship somewhere, and they came into a pact that Saudi Arabia will sell oil to America. In return, America will not do anything about what Saudi Arabia does with its money and then its religion. Religion not to be touched. That was the agreement that came between Roosevelt and the Saudis, and that agreement still is intact. And that's what the core of the problem lies, is that Saudi Arabia has got tremendous amount of money to spare and to spread its vicious Wahhabism. And the whole of Bangladesh, the whole of the bloggers, whatever you see in terms of Islamist extremism is to that. If you can sever that relationship between Saudi Arabia and America, because we know that America is the most powerful nation of the world, and Saudi Arabia is actually borrowing that power and destroying the world and the people's mind. That's all I can say about that.
Yeah, it's really crazy. All right, we got to wrap up here. I mean, as you were saying that, I was thinking maybe there is then some hope in what's happened with Iran because Saudi Arabia doesn't like them. So maybe that is America exerting some positive influence, kinda. Am I stretching there?
There is some hope because, unlike Saudi Arabia, Iran has thousands of years of history, culture. In fact, Bengali culture has got a lot of elements from Iranian. However, the regime that is ruling Iran now is as bad as Saudis. They hang gay people in public. They still have moral police, and they're kind of going towards their nuclear. But they could be a worthy adversary and an ally for America. However, Saudi Arabia is just a dog.
Yeah.
It's just a wild dog. That's
Yeah.
in my view.
All right, well, listen, we could talk so much more, and I absolutely will have you back on again. But give people some hope. I like to end all these things, especially the heavier ones. I like to end them with some hope. We had some horrible things that happened in Bangladesh just in these last few days. We've talked about a lot of the underpinnings in the UK and the US that are sort of depressing when you think about these things. So where's the hope in all this?
I'm still in shock. In the last few days, I haven't been able to actually write anything other than the usual. But in between, we see that the awareness among general people is rising. They're getting interested to know more about the usual bullshit that is in the media. And that's where I think at some point, the world mentality is going to come into one place and some sort of a threshold are going to tip. And then we might see some sort of a resistance against this Islam that is encroaching toward the world. And obviously, we need to sever the connection between the businesses and the business interest and the financial system and Saudi Arabia and all the support that it gets. If we can do that, I think you will see a lot of improvement. And I'm really grateful for you inviting me in your show, and I really look forward to come back and talk more about these issues.
Absolutely. I hope we can do it live next time. Let's give Faisal another shout out for connecting us, and I want to thank Arif Rahman for joining me on the show. And you can check out his writing at Arif, it's ARIF.eu.